It's really about people we want to serve and understanding what they need. And how do we make something delightful for them? How are we going to, really radically enhance their lives?
Mumbai is a city of more than 20 million people, squeezed onto a narrow strip of land between the sea and the mainland. It's dense, vertical, crowded, kinetic, and remarkably short on places to simply be outside in nature. Depending on how you count it, Mumbai has roughly 1 square meter of accessible public space per person. Compare that to cities like Paris or Tokyo with around 5 or 6 square meters per person, or New York with roughly 14. So creating meaningful new open space here isn't simply a matter of finding an empty piece of land and turning it into a park. But one magnificent solution began with a boy and his dog. Rahul Kadri grew up near Malabar Hill, a densely populated neighborhood overlooking the Arabian Sea. As a boy in the 70s, he and his Doberman spent countless days exploring a patch of forest there, a wild, tangled landscape growing along a steep hillside in the middle of the city. But by the late 1980s, the forest had been fenced off. What once had been a part of the neighborhood became inaccessible, and for decades, this extraordinary piece of the city was largely forgotten. Then during the pandemic, Rahul and his wife climbed over the fence. He found the forest he'd known as a boy still there, and he began imagining not just how to build something in it, but how to give it back to the city without destroying the thing that made it extraordinary. Today, a narrow elevated walkway winds through the trees for a little under a half a kilometer. It floats above the forest floor on slender supports, bending around existing trees rather than cutting through them. At points, you're walking at canopy level, surrounded by birds and branches, with glimpses out towards the sea. It's called the Malabar Hill Forest Trail. It opened in 2025 and has quickly become one of Mumbai's most celebrated new public spaces. Rahul Kadri is an architect and urban designer and principal at IMK Architects, the practice founded by his father, Kadri, in 1958. Rahul and I talked about what it means to create public space in a city where land is extraordinarily precious, innovative approaches to housing and density, participatory planning, and another, perhaps more complicated kind of bridge between the legacy of his father's practice and his own ideas about how architecture must respond to a changing city and a changing world. Here's my conversation with Rahul Kadri. So glad to have you on the Sidewalk Ballet.
Thank you. Thank you, Chip. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
So I've gotten to spend some time with a bit of your writings and feel like I'm starting to get to know you, your ideas, your philosophy, not so much as an architect, but as a city maker. I am very interested to talk to you about some of your ideas around density and housing and transportation, and particularly open space and participatory city making. All of that I want to get to, but I feel like there's this project that you did that we should start with. And a little over a year ago, you completed a project that you initiated that has sort of given you an even greater fame and notoriety in the work you do. And I'm speaking of the Urban Forest Bridge. And one of the questions I want to get to is, how does that fit in the context of the other work and the ideas you're working? But in order to do that, I think we should start with some background on the Forest Trail Bridge. So my question would be for you, where does that story start?
It really started because I knew this forest existed, and the government had sealed this land off for the last 35 or 40 years. And nobody in the city got to experience it. This is just in the middle of South Mumbai. So it's one of the densest places in the city, but there was this 12.5-acre forest. And during lockdown, actually, I was walking nearby with my wife, and it suddenly struck me that why don't I share this forest with her? And I helped her jump over the fence, and we walked in. And I had been going there as a kid. When I was 11, 12 years old, I had a Doberman dog, and we used to run around all over Malabar Hill. And this was open then, and anybody could come in, and there was a set of steps that could kind of took you down to the beach from above the hill. But for 40 years, they closed it off because there was no lighting there. It was dark, and then people were, beginning to brew liquor there, and in the 70s and 80s, people started taking drugs there. So the government had sealed it off, and it was a forgotten part of the city. And when I went in with my wife and saw her reaction, and even mine, that wow, this exists. This pristine rainforest exists in a city, and nobody knows about it. And I just felt this desire to share it. I said, a lot more people ought to experience this in the city, which, Mumbai is so starved for open space and for greenery that, I knew, whoever came in here would kind of be wowed that a forest like this exists, a dense forest like this exists in the city. And so, we made over the years many proposals for the city, but as an individual, it's very difficult getting anything built. So this time around, I said, let's strategize differently. And I'm the founder chairman of the Nepean Sea Road Citizens Forum. So we decided to pitch this project as a citizens initiative. And I thought maybe that won't be enough. So let me get one of my billionaire friends to kind of endorse it as well. So Mrs. Sangeeta Jindal of the JSW Group, there's a steel conglomerate over here. She's a friend, and she said, "Yes, I'll assist you." And so we had the JSW logo, we had the Nepean Sea Road, and then we approached the government. Says citizens want to do it. There's a big corporate that's willing to sponsor it. You know, what do you think? And I was amazed at the response. The then environmental minister, Mr. Aditya Thackeray, and he was also the tourism minister, he was fascinated by it. He says, "Wow, where is this? I want to come and see this." So the very next day, we went and saw it, and he said, "This is something we must do." Except, he said, he told his people later, the commissioner, we must do this, but find somebody else. Don't give it to Rahul. Because I had kind of opposed, a marquee project, which is the coastal road. I'd opposed that, and we, with others, we had filed case in the High Court and won and stopped the project, all of that. So it's saying this guy is a pain, so don't give it to him. Find somebody else. And for whatever reason, they couldn't find anybody else who was doing the designs as well as what we had done. Nobody really understood it as well, because I knew that forest like the back of my hand, and I knew, how it should look, and it was all there in the drawings. And whoever else made drawings, they just didn't have that kind of deep feeling for it. So whatever they made just didn't feel the same. But 3 months later, they came back to us and said, "Sorry, Rahul, we've taken our time, but would you please do it?" And that's how we got the project, and we did it. But that's how it started. It was just a desire to share this space that literally nobody knew existed.
You mentioned open public space being kind of at a premium in Mumbai, and Mumbai is very dense, generally speaking, and in certain areas more so. The Indian planning guidelines recommend 10 to 12 square meters per person. Mumbai is sitting around 1 square meter. And I saw one study said 30% of mapped public space isn't actually usable for the public. This seems very unique because you captured a large urban forest that wasn't accessible, it wasn't being used. it's much more accessible than it was, but it's also timed tickets. It's so only so many people could come at a time, and you have to travel to some distance to get there from parts of the city. So how is this scalable on a more geographically dispersed level and maybe smaller scale? Or how can you address more open space in a moment where housing is so needed, infrastructure is so needed? How do you reframe it so it's not development versus preservation, but like what kind of development can make cities more livable?
So, one of the ideas we have is that in every neighborhood, there our spaces can be repurposed, but the government, and the ward officer, the assistant commissioner who's in charge of that particular area, the particular ward, is there for 2 or 3 years and then moves on. So when the city makes its development plan, it doesn't capture the nuances of what's possible in a neighborhood. What we're suggesting is that the government set up a more participatory planning process and even a participatory budget making process so that people who live in the neighborhood know the neighborhood really well and they know what's possible. So if the citizens group teamed up with an architect and came up with an idea, we feel that the government ought to fund them to a very small extent, maybe rupees 5 lakhs, which is 5 lakhs. So rupees 5 lakhs is $5,000, right? So if they're given $5,000 just to develop the idea and develop the budget, and then the citizens of that area, if there are more than one project, they vote for it to happen or not. What we're saying is that, many cities all over the world, 30% of the capital budget, if it's decided by the citizens, then these kind of projects can happen. So, and in Mumbai, that's a lot of money. That's almost 250 million rupees. So that's, you can do that. Someone can do the math. So there is a fair amount of money available, but there's no process to tap into the intelligence of the neighborhood and kind of unlock the value that people in the neighborhood know it's there. So I feel what we've done in Napier She Road and the walkway is because I knew about this. And similarly, there are architects and planners in every neighborhood who know what needs to be done. So I feel we really need a process wherein at least 50 such things are funded by the government every year. And then, 50 are funded every year. In a decade, you can have 500 such. Actually, I wanted to start a seed fund where architects create a fund. And then we fund 40 projects for 5 lakhs every year to develop the concept. And then we present that to the government and say, here are 40 projects or 50 projects that are worked out. There's a citizens group associated with it. There's an urban planner or landscape designer associated with it. It's a ready project. Now you can take it up and it's thought through and the citizens want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the things I've been thinking about is the idea of a project like yours. There's not really a client coming to you as an architect saying, here's the project. I want you to design this. You initiated this. You proposed it. You drove it from inception to ribbon cutting. A fund that is more neighborhood based, that's more created by the residents or who understand it in partnership with designers. I think that's a interesting idea and solves a little bit of that question of like, there's great projects and developers aren't necessarily going to pay for things that don't really provide a return on investment because they can't. That's not their job, right? Other than to help create good cities. Similarly, there's something that you have written about this, the idea of self redevelopment in housing
Mhm.
structures and that concept. Tell me a little bit about that idea of where that came from and what that looks like in practice.
So what's happened in the city is that after recent, in about 3 years ago, the government liberalized how much you can build in a particular plot. So earlier we had a ratio of plot to built up area of about 1.25. And now, depending on the width of the road, you can build almost 4 times that on the same plot. Um, so so Mumbai's development started, say, in the 1950s, and there's lots of buildings now that are kind of reaching the end of their life. But the people living there can't afford to repair it or rebuild it. So in Mumbai, stepping back a little bit, most apartments are cooperatively owned. We have cooperative societies that own the entire building. So everybody has a share. So their apartment, there's a share. So supposing there are 30 apartments, 30 shares. So everybody owned, it's co-owned. So development is then when this cooperative society approaches an architect and says, okay, what's the potential of my plot? And you do an analysis and you say, okay, if you want to rebuild your building, build it. So earlier you could build X amount, now you can build 4X. So this extra amount we would sell to fund the development, and each flat owner would get additional space. So not only would you get a new building, but you get additional space. So selling about, depending on where it is and economics, you'd sell about 30 or 40% of the additional, but the remaining is this extra space is actually shared between the members. And that funds the project. So you can rebuild completely by selling the extra space. The Mumbai Cooperative Bank was set up to be able to fund the process. But unfortunately, the Mumbai Cooperative Bank doesn't have enough money to fund because, we need 50,000 buildings to be rebuilt.
Mhm.
So what's actually happening is that developers are stepping in. When a developer steps in, they take a huge chunk of the profits, right? 30% they will take. So if you're self-developing, you get to keep all of that. So the benefit to people is much more. So all they need to do is hire a team who will design it, build it, sell it for you for a fixed fee, rather than and then the title of the land, etc. The risk is very low. Rather than going in for a developer signing a deal with the developer, wherein you're kind of temporarily handing over ownership of the land to the developer because they're going to take a loan on the land. And then everybody is moving out for 3 or 4 years whilst the building is being rebuilt. There's been cases where, you know, is almost, I think, 300 projects where going with the developers not worked. And now
Mhm.
people are stuck because the building is half built, they moved out, and they don't have money for their rent anymore. So self development is kind of safer and yes, makes more sense. The other thing, so self development is one. This also applies to slums. In Mumbai, 60% of the people live in slums. uh, so of the 22 million people, there are almost 14 million people living in slums. And the government, the only way presently a slum can redevelop is if a developer steps in and makes a proposal. The slum is already very dense, but when a developer steps in, they want to maximize land for sale. So they squeeze the existing slum dwellers into 30% of the land, into very, very unhygienic conditions, and they want to sell 70%. So what we've been proposing to the government is also that even for slums, there should be a mechanism for them to self-develop, redevelop on their own, and redevelop such that they're creating housing which is of similar typologies of what they have. So very low cost. So if they're building 500 square feet homes, then a developer will want to sell luxury homes, 1,000 square feet, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 square feet. So the new people coming in don't kind of mix with the existing people. Here, what we are saying is that create the same typology of home, so it becomes a neighborhood and it becomes a community. You're kind of taking in more people. So it's not only for the middle class, but also people living in slums.
When we come back, Rahul talks about inheriting his father's architectural legacy, designing for friendship, and rethinking not just what architects design, but how they design it. Stay with us. IMK Kadri was one of the significant architects of post-independence India, beginning his practice in Bombay in 1958. Over the course of his career, he designed more than 100 buildings in India and abroad, from hotels and housing to major civic and institutional projects, including Mumbai's landmark Nehru Center. His work earned recognition in India and internationally, and in 2021, at the age of 91, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to Indian architecture and construction. So when Rahul joined his father's firm, he wasn't simply joining a family business. He was stepping into a significant architectural legacy. How was that? Like, what was that like? Because you came into a pretty big shadow, right? And you had some big shoes to fill, and I'm sure you learned a lot from him, and other things from like your schooling. You were out here in Berkeley, right?
No, I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I did my master's there. And then I came to Berkeley to work with it.
Oh, got it.
Christopher Alexander. So I worked with him and then worked for another firm there. But Chris Alexander was basically someone I had read a lot in school and wanted to work with. So what had happened basically is that India, after 1991, liberalized, and there was a lot of construction. So I joined my father's practice in 1989, and by 2000, he was 70 years old, and most of his corporate clients, etc., weren't building anymore. They kind of, passed the buck. There was younger people, younger CEOs, and the way they selected their architect had changed. It was no more the priority of a CEO to select an architect. It was that they were pushing it down the line. They were telling, a senior manager or something to finalize the architect. The senior managers usually didn't have the confidence to suggest one name. So they would suggest 3 names or 4 names, and then they'd make you compete to get the job. My father, at that point of time, said, I'm not competing. I am who I am. If they want to work with us, fine. And even the government was, doing a lot of building through the competition route. And each time I would ask him, we should compete too. He said, no, we won't. If they want to come to us, they will come. And as a result of that, we weren't getting much work. We had these salary bills, but there wasn't any money coming in. So I literally had to compete behind his back. Because computers had just come in, we were using them. He didn't know what we were doing in the computers. So, I had a small team of three, and we started competing with behind his back. That's the only way we could get work. And once, so I competed for the Symbiosis campus, which is a 230-acre uh, a, uh, a university campus. We won that, and then we went to him and said, this is what we've done. We competed, we won. Now we have a project, and those big. So then I literally had to create a list of clients of my own through the competitions which we did, and then repeat work for them. So once you build a relationship, then they
Right.
give. So for the Symbiosis group, we went on to do almost 30 buildings. Even for Club Mahindra, we competed to do a resort, and then we went on to do many, many more projects for them. So we literally had to rebuild the firm because the way commissions were given had changed, and the people who were his clients were just not there anymore. And people thought we were too big
Right.
to give projects to. So yeah, it was very, very hard to rebuild the firm. And having senior architects who'd been with him, salary is really high. And me, the younger one, having to come in and support the entire firm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was very hard. I've actually now, started a development firm. So I'm also a developer.
Oh God. Did
Yeah.
you
And
did
that's going well.
so you started working with your father in 89, so you were a young man. Did you always know this was your path, that you would be an architect and follow in the footsteps, or did you ever consider becoming a rock
Well,
star or the priesthood or something else?
I did. So yeah, I was kind of brainwashed into being, but
Right.
I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. I I'm very fond of the horses, so I wanted to have a stud farm, and I wanted to be an agriculturist at some point. So my connection to nature is there and animals. But no, it was kind of since a very young age, it was kind of drilled into my head that you're going to be an architect. And in India we have these holy men called sadhus, right? So my mom had one come over once, and they kind of read your farm, and they look at you and they tell you your future kind of stuff. So this guy who I saw my mom really respected, etc., took one look at me, and he said, you're going to be a great architect. So those kind of self-fulfilling
Right.
thoughts are planted in you.
Did your mom put him up
Um,
to that? Like, oh, you're gonna
I
go
don't
tell
know.
him.
I doubt it. I doubt that. But
That's funny.
it was there. So I'm actually thinking, so when exactly is this going to happen? When am I going to be a great architect? I'm still thinking that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So I did consider, but I also, when I graduated from Ann Arbor, I had no intention of working for my father. I had wanted to start this little firm of my own, but uh, fathers being fathers, he had a way to kind of get to me. At that point of time, my my mother ran a very large NGO, and they land, unfortunately, for some you know kind of work in the law. Her NGO ran into some legal problems, which was silly, but it was there. And so when I came back from the US, he said, "Oh, I've been spending so much time trying to solve mom's problems. Our projects are behind this schedule. I really need your help." You know, and I said, "You need my help? Of course."
Yeah, thanks.
So that's how I joined
Yeah,
him. I had no intention to, but when a father says, "I've been helping your mom, and I
right.
need your help," and You can help. Yeah, of course I helped. Within a month, I knew he didn't need my help at all.
Right.
But then I
Yeah.
was there by
This
myself.
is your desk. Sit here and
Yeah,
start
yeah, yeah,
drafting.
yeah.
When you started with that legacy, your father built some very important buildings in Mumbai and elsewhere. What was important for you to preserve, and where did you see you wanted to expand and put your fingerprints on?
Yeah. So there's two aspects of my father's work. One is his buildings are quite sculptural, and they're fairly strong statements. Um, and the other is they're very biophilic. They've always incorporated gardens, courtyards, um, plants within the building. Um, so for me, it was really the second part, the biophilic part, that uh, uh, resonated with me. And but this what did so his buildings kind of are very elegant structures in the environment, um, and I would say, I don't know, if they're like him, uh, have a presence, and they kind of speak. My buildings are more humble. There've always been two aspects that I've been interested in, and this is really from Christopher Alexander and Charles Moore. There are two in modern life and in the capitalist world. There are two things we crave the most: a sense of community, to belong to a community, to be a part of, and to live in the forest. Um, and both these are denied to us in the capital's world. And so that in all the projects we do, these are the two things we strive to, how can we build community? Will this project create friendships? Will friendships be formed easily and quickly? So if we're designing a township, or if we're designing a university, university complex, where children, the age of 18 are leaving their home for the first time and coming to, live in this place, starry-eyed, wondering, their whole lives ahead of them, they've left home. Um, that first week is really, they're making their friends. And, the first 2 or 3 weeks is when they'll probably make some of the closest friends in their lives. So our endeavor is, how can we expose them to the maximum number of people so they don't close their choices very quickly? Because usually it's whoever's in your dorm or whoever you've seen 3 or 4 times, in that first couple of weeks, who become your friends. And these are lifelong friends. So those are the kind of questions that, how can we, in the first 2 or 3 weeks, how can we make sure that they see people repeatedly, the same people? You know, if they eyed someone and say, this one looks interesting, if they don't see that person again in the first few weeks, then the opportunity is gone. So how do we create that energy where people are going to meet each other often in the first few weeks, for the friendships to form, and then, you know going forward? So in our designs, we always try and bring people together and have some form of a street. The university will be a street, and everybody will walk on that street, and that will connect everything. My son went to Tufts outside Boston, and when I went to drop him there, I could see so easily that this university was not designed for friendship. because the residences, the entrances of the buildings are so random, and there's so many routes to get to the dining hall and to get to the common spaces, that for people to meet each other is really difficult. And I remember the dean had come to Bombay, and I told him, there are these very few things you can do, and friendships at Tufts will be better. And he looked at me bewildered. He said, "Well, like, what's wrong with you?" I'm an urban planner, and I can tell you the sense of community will be so much better if you just change a few of the entrances in your buildings. And I feel if entrances talk to each other, then people will.
Hmm. If entrances talk to each other, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
tell me, you said the two things we desire are community and belonging and living in the forest. How does social infrastructure relate to nature-based infrastructure in your mind? How do they work together?
No, so it's really introducing nature in the building. So when I say live in the forest, no, I don't mean live in the forest. I mean greening, uh, creating shade, having many more trees, being exposed to nature more directly. The moment you step out of your house, or you're in your house, in your balcony, just creating spaces for nature to thrive around you. In urban planning terms, what Christopher Alexander says, having fingers where you have nature and built space kind of you know kind of intertwined, where so if one finger is nature and the other is built, they kind of intertwine, so bringing it in. And there are cities in the world who do it fairly well. I mean, Copenhagen, I was there recently, they do it fairly well. So yeah, it's not forest, it's nature.
I got a little too literal there. I was thinking Hansel and Gretel there, and but I so one of the things that we were talking about, your the impact you've had on the firm. One of the things I understand, I read you brought a Scrum process to the work, which to some might seem somewhat antithetical from an architect firm where you have a visionary designer and then people implement the design. And the Scrum is a little more about facilitating collaboration. Right. So how has that changed the process and the products for the work in working in that kind of environment or with that kind of process?
so so this thing of the architect being the creator and having this vision, this Howard Roark kind of you know way of working, we've found that that's not how buildings are built, and that's not how projects happen. The clients have a lot of say. So, if we are doing a resort, or we're doing a university campus, or a housing a building, the clients have a lot of say. So my buildings are not so much about the sculpture; they're about creating places where people thrive. So, there's a certain geometry which allows certain functions to happen. And we want to get that geometry right, so that what needs to happen there happens, naturally, in the most, least effort. So, one, understanding who the building is for, um, and the various different groups and types of building, or groups and types of people who are going to use the building. Then what is it that they want to do? How are they going to use it, and understand why? So Scrum really is about these three things, right? It's who, what, why. Who is this for? What do they want? And why is that important? Um, so understanding that deeply with our clients, and our clients' clients. So it's not only the client, because even the client serves somebody, right? So we see as our buildings as serving a need and understanding that what are those needs. It's also the 80-20 principle where, you know, 20% of the features of the building is going to give you 80% of the value. So what, and usually there isn't enough money, there's not enough space. So then what are the features we want to focus on, and what's important for the users? So we don't presume in the beginning that we know everything. We presume that, you know, we need to have a conversation and understand the user much better to be able to design for them. Um, so that's where it comes from. Um, I've always been interested in design process, and somehow in my head, this thing of, you know, an individual architect sitting in his studio sketching and coming up with something brilliant just didn't seem right. Uh, Also, there's a client who's paying, and they have a say. So it's really about the people we want to serve and understanding what they need, and how do we make something delightful for them. You know, how are we going to, you know, really radically enhance their lives? And they may not know it, that we've done all this thing. It just may seem so seamless that things just happen there, and they take it for granted, which is fine. So that's what we are after, you know, in the buildings that we do, and that's why this collaboration, I feel, is crucial. We usually start a project by having a workshop with our clients, and I tell them, I want your entire brain's trust to be in the room with us for 4 hours. I don't want a brief from you. I want your entire brain's trust to be in the room. So if you're doing a resort, we need the CEO, the CFO, the marketing head, the sales head, the chief engineer, all in the room with us, brainstorming, and then we take them through um, a series of questions, understanding, you know who their clients are, what their brand ought to be, why it is, how will people feel better, what are the features that people are really going to love, and then we actually rate them all. We use the, the Fibonacci method, which is there in Scrum, to kind of rate all the features. Um, and it's also about efficiency, because I don't want to spend, I don't want my team to spend a month designing something that the client doesn't need. Yeah. So it's also a cost thing. So we want to do what's really needed and appreciated.
Sounds like a really fun process.
It is fun. It also, so using the Fibonacci numbers to train, to educate our clients, on what's more important. See, ideas come up throughout the project, right? New ideas come as you're working on it. It's not that it's done once, right? Um, you know, 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, during the construction, new ideas come, and we welcome that. We feel every new idea ought to be examined, because it's usually to make the project better. It's a pain, but it usually does make the project better. But we when a new idea comes, then we just ask a client, okay, what's your Fibonacci number for this? And if it's a 2 or a 3, then they themselves know that, okay, it's, and it's and the question is always, do you love the idea, or is your client going to love the, or the user going to love it? How important is it for them? Because we don't want a CEO of a company to kind of, his pet thoughts and his or her pet things. We don't really care about that. We care about the CEO's clients. What are they going to love? So asking what's the number, and the number is the Fibonacci numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. So if they rate it 21 and above, that's when we say, okay, this seems like it's important. Let's pause.
Yeah, let's figure out how to get there. So when you go to the back to the trail now today, it's only been open really for a little over a year, but you've been going there all your life. When you go today, what makes you smile?
Just seeing everybody there, seeing everybody enjoy it, the simplicity of it. And people of all ages, people of all backgrounds come there. They're making Instagram films there, and just enjoying it. Parents with their kids, grandparents with their grandkids, pointing out stuff over there. It's like, yes, this works. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to visit it someday. I'll get out there and see it. It sounds like just a really spectacular and beautiful project. So congratulations on that. Thank you so much for the conversation. This was really a delight to get to know you a little bit and learn more about the work you're doing and the way you're thinking. It's really great.
Thank you.
Rahul Kadri is principal architect and partner at IMK Architects and the visionary behind the Malabar Hill Forest Trail. For more information about Rahul and the trail, visit imkarchitects.com. And as always, you can find links in the show notes or at sidewalkballet.com. Sidewalk Ballet is a production of Big Creative Consulting, strengthening community through culture and place. Our theme music is composed by the Peacoat Project, audio mastering by Ryan Musante. If this conversation has meant something to you and you'd like to help support future episodes of the Sidewalk Ballet, you can find links in the show notes.
And Chip, I'm going to put in a little plug for my daughter. So she lives in Palo Alto, and she exports some of the best spices you'll ever get.
Good to know.
India, and from farmers she personally knows. So Diaspora Co. is the name of a company. You can order on the net, and you will never go back to buying any other spice ever once you buy hers.
I'm Chip. I'll see you downtown.